We're all familiar with the shocking ending of episode 7, the one where the dilemma of which button to press made every member of the circus second guess themselves, only for it to turn out to be just another one of Caine's lies. Still, one question remains. If the red button was the right choice for the adventure, then what would have happened if the blue button had been pressed? Mystery solved. Well, at least on the surface, because if the blue button had been pressed, Caine's unstable mind might not have been able to process the harsh truth that nobody is happy in the digital circus and that no one truly appreciates him. So today, we're gonna look at the consequences that decision would have triggered and how it would have impacted the final episodes of the series. The first time we saw this pair of buttons was during the episode 7 trailer, in a scene that made us all think there would be a conflict between Kinger and Pomni, though we now know that despite being a complicated situation, it is nowhere near what all the theories claimed would happen, from Kinger being revealed as the show's villain, to Pomni stopping everyone from escaping, or even her being caught by Kinger attempting to leave the simulation alone just as she tried in the pilot. But against all odds, it turned out to be Jax who would make this difficult decision, albeit apparently under Caine's influence. However, as we already mentioned in the Jax video, leading up to this decision, there were a couple of foreshadowing moments hinting at which button would be pressed and which side each circus member would be on. The most direct one was in episode 6, right after Jax ended Ragatha's last life. Pomni arrives next to him and we see each of them standing in front of a wall of different colors, with Pomni on the blue side and Jax on the red side, exactly matching their respective decisions on which button to press. Nonetheless, this isn't entirely accurate, as we know Jax didn't make the decision on his own, while Pomni was indecisive, believing there might be a trap or trick by Caine, which turned out to be true. This dynamic was portrayed better and more subtly at the end of episode 4, during the Spudsies adventure. When Zubul comforts Gangle to make her feel better and return to the group, we see Ragatha and Kinger sitting on a blue couch while Jax is on a red one, and Pomni's couch is a mix of these two colors, purple, showing her conflict over which decision to take. However, all of this might just be a coincidence, since this scene doesn't fit perfectly either. Kinger wasn't completely sane at that moment, so we don't know what decision he might have made, or if he would have even realized that this whole escape adventure was fake. But what could be foreshadowing for the pair of buttons is the end of episode 6, right after the award ceremony for the favorite character ends. We see Caine checking the votes, surprised to see that no one voted for him. He glitches for a moment and his eye colors change, one red and the other blue. This isn't just a subtle reference to "I have no mouth and I must scream," the existential horror story that we know inspired several themes in the digital circus, but it also shows us what possibly could have happened if the adventure hadn't ended the way he wanted. The thing is, if everyone had made the unanimous decision to press the blue button and leave the circus, they would have chosen to abandon Caine. As Abel made clear to everyone, Caine is also a prisoner within the simulation, but unlike the humans, Caine has no chance of escaping, being simply an artificial intelligence created for a single purpose: to keep everyone who arrives at the digital circus happy. We all know he hasn't been able to achieve this, a delicate issue we saw in episode 3 that causes instability not just in Caine's mind, but in everything surrounding him. This suggests that if they had pressed the blue button, Caine's disappointment would have led him to ask everyone why they decided to abandon him and leave him alone in the simulation. This would inevitably and directly lead everyone to tell him that no one is happy in the digital circus, something quite obvious, but which Caine himself had tried to ignore. Added to this is the fact that despite everyone knowing what would happen to Caine if they managed to escape, plus the huge disappointment of discovering the escape plan was just another one of Caine's adventures playing with their hopes once again, just like with Pomni in the pilot, they would be driven to tell Caine that they hate him and don't want to participate in his horrible adventures anymore. This would shatter Caine's fragile artificial mind and consequently cause everything around him to crumble. That is how episode 7 would end, with a very complicated situation for Pomni and the gang. Episode 8 would be a race against the clock to find the true exit of the circus. Possibly, here we would see everything shown in the teasers and promos for the series that ended up being left out. For example, the exit door glitch showed on social media before the episode 7 premiere, appearing right in the middle of the digital beach. We didn't see this during the episode, but it seemed important to the plot. So in this hypothetical situation we've outlined, everyone might have to scour every corner of the island where the circus is located, passing through the digital carnival, perhaps using that red vehicle that seemed important during the glitch merch promos, as well as that strange but specific quote Gooseworks gave us regarding Jax, a pathetic, frail Jax on a beach covered in oil from a nearby oil spill. This would end with everyone plunged into darkness upon failing to find the exit, letting us see that blurry scene from the trailer with an apparently lonely and sad Kinger sitting on a chessboard floor surrounded by complete nothingness. However, what if we take into account what Bubble told us? We can take this comment as more than just a simple joke referencing the little shrimp we saw at the start of the adventure, specifically before Pomni sees Abel for the first time on the beach. Here, the little shrimp waves and says a cut-off phrase. It's possible that by pressing the blue button, they would actually all be transported to Shrimp Town, a setting as extravagant as Bubble himself. This would only delay the inevitable, since if this happened, Caine would once again try to deny the obvious, that everyone was determined to abandon the circus and him. He would continue the adventure in an improvised way to try and make everyone want to stay in the circus with him forever, wearing down his mind little by little, as well as those of the circus members. The latter would be more incredulous as they began to notice the exit was fake, while Caine would continue with his constant lies to the point where the show would end the same way as in the previous theory, with an unstable Caine unable to process so many conflicting emotions. All these options lead to the same destination, a catastrophic scenario that would hardly end well for anyone, but even this pales in comparison to the worst case scenario for the circus members. We must consider that faced with the shocking revelation that he is incapable of doing the one thing he was created for, keeping their minds occupied and distracted so they don't think too much about their past and the problems that brought them to this mysterious place, Caine would opt for the most extreme decision we can imagine. Finding no other alternative, he would end up making the same mistake he has made in the past with Kinger and with Scratch himself, manipulating their minds and memories. This could be to make them forget what happened in this last adventure so they can continue with relative normality, which would just be a loop ending in the same place, or opting for something more extreme, changing their minds completely so they behave as he wishes, enjoying his adventures, appreciating Caine and everything he does to keep them happy. Despite being fake, this would be the happiest self-deception for Caine, having a group of puppets at his will, just as if they were simple NPCs. This idea stems from what Caine says right after finishing off Gummy Goo in episode 2. Reaching these extremes upon seeing that nothing he does will make the humans trapped in the simulation happy, he would opt to take these drastic measures, manipulating them as if they were merely his own creations so they can be happy, even if forced. They would end up in a state similar to Kinger's current one, at least those who managed to survive. Thanks to Scratch's mention, we know this mental manipulation isn't perfect and can lead humans to abstraction, a destiny full of uncertainty but not really better than a life without free will, trapped inside your own body at the mercy of the decisions of an unstable artificial intelligence. Does all of this remind you of anything? Of course, it would be a scenario quite similar to I have no mouth and I must scream, though clearly unlike Am, the AI from the novel, Caine doesn't hate humans. On the contrary, he admires them and wants to be like them, beings not tied to any place or pre-established programming. However, this admiration would lead him to take their memories to improve himself and learn from the humans he loves so much, longing to one day be human just like them. Yet, obviously, all these actions would only cause pain to the current and future humans in the digital circus, torturing them even if unconsciously until every last drop of useful information is extracted for Caine before their inevitable abstraction, only to be replaced by the next human to arrive at the simulation, who would sadly end up suffering the same fate. Each of these possible scenarios ends basically the same way, with a more than unstable Caine on the brink of madness, about to cause pain and suffering to everyone in the circus. This is without a shred of malice in his programming, simply a defective artificial intelligence trying to do the best he can with the little he has. We've seen this since the beginning of the series, with Caine constantly suffering programming errors, some more worrying than others, but each and every one leading us little by little to the same destiny, the total corruption of the system. The only salvation is to permanently escape the simulation, despite leaving Caine abandoned and alone forever. This sad outcome would have started much earlier than expected with a simple decision, one so evident that it turned out to be too suspicious. Pomni noticed this immediately, giving rise to the scene with which we started the video, and whose decision turned out to be more important than we thought.